Well, good afternoon to everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. It's my first time in Lisboa. I was also surprised 2 weeks ago to hear that my book had been translated and published in Portuguese. That I hadn't known that before. So now we have it already in 8 or 9 languages. So I will talk to you about the tragedy of the euro and why the euro from the beginning, from the outset, was doomed to fail. So, if you want to understand the euro, you have to look at it from two sides. You have to study the history of the euro, how it came about, and what were the political interests behind it, and only then you may understand how we got into this situation and what may be expected in the future ahead of us. And this has to be combined with the monetary analysis of the euro system. But let me set the stage with a more general view on two visions for Europe. They are basically two totally opposed visions for how Europe should be like. The first one is the classical liberal vision, or the liberal vision. The founding fathers of the European Union, Konrad Adenauer, Robert Schuman, and Fidel Gaspari, were still closer to this vision. By the way, they all spoke German to each other, and they were all Christian Democrats, so they had this in common. And they were, of course, still influenced very strongly by the experiences of the Second World War, and they thought that free trade in Europe would lead to peace. And for this vision, the most fundamental European value is the most fundamental, not only European but also Christian value, is individual liberty. In this vision, they are sovereign states that defend private property rights, and they are open borders, free exchange of goods, services, and movement of capital and ideas. So for this vision, the Treaty of Rome of 1957 was a first step, or a first success, because the Treaty of Rome established the 4 liberties, the so-called 4 liberties: free movement of goods, services, capital, and free migration. From this perspective, the only disadvantage or fault in the Treaty of Rome was, of course, the common agricultural policy, subsidies, and central planning in agriculture that were introduced by French initiative in the Treaty of Rome. But it was a first success. And the classical liberalism, they wanted just to bring back, or the classical liberal view just wants to bring back what classical liberalism had achieved in the 19th century and what had been lost in the age of nationalism and socialism in the 20th century and in 2 world wars. For the liberal vision, you only need liberty for harmonic cooperation. You don't need a European superstate. In fact, the vision is opposed to a European superstate because the European superstate is seen as a danger for individual liberty. And as the founders were also Christians from Christian democratic parties, they saw the limits, the borders, or the limits for the EU would be Christianity. And they also were Catholics, so they subscribed to the principle of subsidiarity to solve the problems at the lowest level possible. The only central institution that you would need in this, or you could need in this vision, would be a central European court that defends the 4 liberties and solves conflicts between states. Well, opposed to this liberal vision, we have the socialist or empire vision. Most prominent defenders of this vision are politicians like Jacques Delors and François Mitterrand. And this vision is backed by a coalition of nationalists, socialists, and social democrats. They want Europe as an empire or fortress that is protectionist to the outside and interventionist to the inside. The idea is to have a central European state directed by technocrats. There's empire against the periphery. The sovereign states stop to exist. There's centralization of legislation, of regulations. There's what they call harmonization of taxes on the highest level, of course. So the idea is to have a European superstate that can solve all the problems for humanity in Europe. The vast majority of the political class, bureaucrats, interest groups, political lobbies, subsidized sectors, they all support this idea of having a central state in Europe because they want to use the state to enrich themselves. And in the end, the sovereign states become subjects to Brussels. This idea of a central European state is nothing new. Already Charles the Great, Napoleon, Hitler, and Stalin, they all wanted to create a European empire with military means, but they failed. And now the idea is to achieve it via political means. One of the tactics is typical tactic to employ to use crisis situations to introduce new institutions and to increase the power of central institutions, assuming more powers. You can see this already in this crisis. This crisis has been exploited in this way. For example, the Commission behaves as if Greece or Portugal Island would be their protectorates. They tell them how to reduce their deficits, what to do. The ECB also expanded power. They assumed more power, started to buy government bonds outright, and expanded their balance sheets. And new institutions were founded, the European Financial Stability Facility, and so on. So we have this fight between the classical liberal and the socialist vision from the beginning of the EU. The fight is clear because there's a conflict. More power for the central state means less individual liberty. So who is on which side traditionally? Well, traditionally the Christian democratic parties have been more on the classical liberal side. The Netherlands, Great Britain, Margaret Thatcher, and also Germany has been more on the liberal side, while social democrats, socialists, under the leadership normally of France, have been on the socialist side. France is an important case because it's an important power behind this vision. After the humiliation of 1940 and the loss of the colonies, France, the French political elite, was actually looking for a substitute of its lost empire in Europe. Moreover, the idea or the aim of the French political elite was to prevent Germany from recuperating its natural weight in the heart of Europe and from getting its lost territories back. So the idea was to get Germany into a socialist European Union under the leadership of France. So the fight goes on, and it looks like that the socialists are slowly winning because the EU budget is increasing. There are ever more regulations. There's a tendency in the setup for centralization because the EU Commission has the initiative for new legislation. So it seemed that the socialists were winning, but then some unexpected event happened that Ludwig von Mises had predicted 70 years ago. It is that communism collapsed. The Berlin Wall came down in 1998. And this changed the scenario completely in this balance of power. Because what does it mean for the fight in Europe, for the liberal and the socialist side? Well, Germany was going to be reunited. That is, Germany would gain more power, and Germany was closer to the liberal side. And the new states of the East, Romania, Polonia, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, were also pushing towards Europe. And they had, of course, at least for now, enough of empires and socialism. So they would come and join, obviously, the fight on the classical liberal side. So the balance of power was about to tip against the socialists. What was the reaction? The reaction was to accelerate and intensify the efforts to prevent the fast extension of the EU eastwards, because there was a fear of a degeneration of the European Union, that so only free trade zone if this would happen. So they pushed forward towards centralization, and this step to do this was to accelerate the plans for a single currency, the euro. The fall of the Berlin Wall prevented actually a unique possibility for the French political elite to get rid of the discipline imposed on them by the Bundesbank. There was a saying that the most dreaded institution after the Second World War was the Bundesbank. Why? Because when the Bundesbank raised interest rates, the Bank of France had to raise interest rates also, because if they did not, there would be an embarrassing devaluation of their currency, of the franc. So if they wanted to maintain more or less stable exchange rate, they had to follow the interest rates movements of the Bundesbank. Otherwise, it would be a devaluation. A devaluation is a clear sign for the population that there has been inflation. It's like a smoking gun. So, against their will, they had to have higher interest rates, and higher interest rates means less money production. That means less monetization of government deficits. That means less government spending. That means less power for the French government. So, by the restrictive monetary policy of the Bundesbank, it was indirectly restricting French government spending. So the rulers of the war were actually restricting the power of the government of the winners. Why was the Bundesbank so restrictive in its monetary policy? Well, basically because of the Germans that had experienced two hyperinflations in the 20th century after each war. Of course, also German politicians wanted more inflation, but no one dared to fight against the Bundesbank because the Bundesbank had a very strong, and still has a very strong support in the population. Any politician that dared or wanted to touch the independence of the Bundesbank would lose elections. So this was the limit for French inflation and French government spending that had to be reduced. Actually, at the end of the 1980s, there was an interesting anecdote. There was a meeting between French and German diplomats, and the Germans wanted to speak about atomic weapons, nuclear bombs that were stationed, short-range nuclear bombs that were stationed near the German border and could only explode in Germany. So they were saying, well, this is a really awkward situation for us, this nuclear bomb so near to us that can only explode in Germany. Can we do something about that? Well, the response of the French was, let's first talk about the German nuclear bomb. And the Germans, surprised, the Germans, well, but you know that we don't have nuclear weapons, we are not allowed to have nuclear weapons. So, and then the French said, well, we mean the D-Mark, the Deutsche Mark. So they saw this like almost as a military fear or aggression against at least a symbol of German power. They wanted to get rid of it. And the fall of the Berlin Wall provided this possibility. This is already a fact, because the archives were opened that François Mitterrand demanded the single currency, the euro, in exchange for his permission for reunification, German reunification. You might be surprised that Germany needed this, but the situation in 1989 was still that Germany was occupied by the four allies. Of course, it was military vastly inferior to France. And Mitterrand actually threatened, saying that if we don't step forward now with European integration, we will have a situation like in 1913, 1 year before the First World War, where Germany was. So surrounded by enemies. So this meant finally the end of the D-Mark, an important victory for the socialist side. Why? But this we'll see later, that the euro provokes sovereign debt crisis, and these debt crises can then be used for more centralization. And the end of the euro indeed would mean the end for the socialist vision, at least in the short and medium term. And that's the reason why politicians will defend the euro until the very end. So, why did high inflation countries, Club Med, wanted the euro? What were the advantages? Well, I already spoke about the first one. They wanted to get rid of the power of the Bundesbank and get access to monetary policy. Now in the ECB, Germany has only one vote, and Malta has one vote, and German monetary politicians are often in the minority, and as you know, two of them have actually left in protest the ECB. So this was the first, where you get also the prestige, or they tried to get the prestige of the Bundesbank for the new currency by putting the ECB in Frankfurt and so on. And you get a stronger currency that has cheaper imports. Then the point of seigniorage is interesting. Seigniorage is the profit from central bank money production. So central banks get profits, for example, from the loans that they give to the banks, so they receive interest. So the Bundesbank receives interest, the Bank of France receives interest, and they pool all this. They pool all this at the ECB, and then they distribute it again to the central banks. But they don't distribute it in function of the assets of the central banks, because otherwise, because if this would be the case, you would get exactly that back what you put in the pool. No. They distribute it in function of a number calculated by GDP and population. So if you have, as a central bank, more assets than relative to this number, you lose. You pay more in than you receive. So it's a redistribution where, for example, Spain and Germany lose and France wins. Well, lower interest rates on government debts. Well, the euro came as and is a political project. It came with an implicit guarantee to bail out countries. So the risk premium went down for southern countries. The risk premium, so the interest rate they had to pay on government debt were reduced. And inflationary expectations came also down because it was supposed that the euro, of course, would be stronger than the lira or the dirham was before. So that meant that these countries had to pay much lower interest rates on their debts, and this gave them a margin for more deficits and for more government spending. It was also an excuse for austerity. You have to remind that at the beginning of the 1990s, some countries were already on the verge of bankruptcy, like Italy, Belgium. So they had to do something. They had to reduce government spending, privatize, and the euro gave them an excuse. They could tell their populations, well, we have to get into the euro because this will be paradise. So we have to now do some reforms. So it would be an excuse for something that would have been necessary in any case. Well, then there's monetary redistribution, that most of the new money flows into Southern Europe. And finally, you also get they could also get a stronger currency, and this means more imports, higher standard of living, more consumption, a happier population. Before the euro, in Germany there would be a restrictive monetary policy, saving, capital accumulation, so productivity would increase, there would be more exports, and as a result, the D-mark would appreciate. And this meant that the dividend of the hard work, of the saving, of the higher profitability would be spread to all Germans, because the D-mark would appreciate. It means that any German could import cheaper, could go cheaper on vacation in Greece. So it was a social dividend. Now this dividend is not only given to Germany, but spread to the south. So the southern countries have a stronger currency than they would have had otherwise. They had cheaper imports. And this, also coupled with the lower interest rates, led to a consumption and construction boom in some countries. These are some graphs to illustrate the points I made before. Here you can see the interest rates. You can see that they converged to the German level. Because the risk premium was reduced and the inflationary period. You see, when it becomes clear who will join the club, they come to the German level. Well, there's still a gap with Greece, because in 1998 it was not still clear that they would falsify their statistics and then get entry in 2001. This is the exports. High exports lead to appreciation, a stronger currency. You see that the German export surplus is almost compensated by the import surplus of Club Med. This is the balance of trade in time. So you see that this actually has increased over time. The export surplus of Germany has increased, while the others the import surplus of the others has increased. Competitiveness. You can see in this graph competitiveness calculated by unit labor costs. You see that southern countries have become less competitive over time. They have actually used cheap money and high government spending to maintain and aggravate an uncompetitive economies. So they have lived beyond the means. While on the other hand, you see that by moderate wage increases in Germany, the unit labor cost, so competitiveness has increased. This is a sign of the standard of living, retail sales, consumption. You can see that in Germany, blue line consumption since the introduction of the euro has stagnated. Standard of living flat. In contrast to USA, France, or UK, to take a southern country, Spain, retail sales have increased in only 8 years, more than 20%. And then during after the crisis, they collapsed. This is the monetary redistribution. You see that M3 is growing faster, or has been growing faster in the southern countries than in Germany. The big thick line is Germany. So, when we consider all these disadvantages for Germany of the euro, why did Germany join the euro in the first place? Especially as the population, economists, and lawyers were against it. Well, the first reason I already talked about, that Mitterrand demanded it as a permission, for his permission for reunification. Then, German politicians also wanted to get rid of the Bundesbank, because it's a limit on German government spending. And many of them were, or are socialists that want the socialist vision to go on, to have a central European state. When they retire from the national parliament, they can get very nice jobs than in Brussels. Also, there are important interest groups that want the socialist vision to go on, because they are in favor of harmonization of regulation, for example. Environmental regulation or labor regulation is very high in Germany. So companies many of them want that these harsh regulations are also applied to other countries. they want this harmonization to go on. Then big exporters also were in favor of the euro, because with the euro you don't have this competitive these devaluations anymore. Italy, for example, cannot devalue its currency anymore to get competitive. So this constant pressure to innovate that existed in the times of the Lima were eliminated. But here I want to make one point on exports, because there's much confusion going on exports. If exports are good or bad. Well, if you look at a single person, when I work, I'm exporting my services. When I sell my suit, I'm exporting goods. When I buy a drink in a bar, I'm importing goods. When I get a haircut, I'm importing services. So if I could decide, or if they ask me, Philip, do you want only to import or only to export? What would I do? Well, I would only import. And this is, as we have seen, what Southern Europe did, or to the extreme. Well, lastly, prevent sovereign and financial collapse. As I said, in the beginning of the 1990s, some countries were already on the verge of bankruptcy. And due to the euro and the low interest rates, they could go on. And if there would have been a default of Italy, for example, in the beginning of the 1990s, this would have had problems for the German banking system. There might have been a European financial crisis, exactly as now. And of course, the German financial political elites were scared of this, as they are now. Well, let's now go on to the monetary setup of the euro system. How can governments finance the deficits? Well, governments spend usually more than they receive in taxes, so for the difference they print paper and they write on it government bonds. And these government bonds, large part of it is bought by the banking system, can be by money production, so the government gets financed. Then the banking system can use these bonds and pledge them as collateral at the ECB to get new loans, new reserves, which is very interesting, because with the new reserves they can engage in the profitable business of money production, very expansion. So the banking system uses this government bonds, goes to the ECB to get new reserves. So this is the indirect monetization as it works in Europe. In the US it's a little bit different, because the Fed directly buys bonds. Well, it's very nice to finance yourselves. Of course, then you have to pay interest on your government bonds to the banking system. Banking system has to pay interest for the loans, for the reserves that it receives from the ECB. And then the ECB has profits and gives it back to the government. So, very nice system. Here you can see the bank holdings of government debts. You can see it's 2 trillion euros, or it was in March. This has increased. This is in percentage. Almost 1/3 of all government debt is held by banks. Or in 2010. Well, if you think back on this chart, this process is very profitable, and not only one government can do it, but all governments in the European Union, in the European Monetary Union. This is a speciality of the Eurozone that has brought it to the collapse. Any government can print government bonds, and then the banks buy them and use them as collateral, and new money is produced. There's then a redistribution, a Cantillon effect. Because when new money produced, the first receivers of the new money profit. Why? Because they have more money and they buy at the old lower prices. And then the money spreads, the prices rise, and at the end are people that lose because they have to pay higher prices while the income has not increased yet. So if you have deficits, you can benefit on cost of other users of the currency that are not only your own citizens but also citizens of other countries. So you can externalize part of the cost of your deficits, the cost of high prices, on foreigners. This obviously doesn't happen in the US, for example. Moreover, you can only profit if you have a higher deficit than others. Think of this example. Think that Germany has a deficit of 3% of GDP, it prints government bonds, the banks monetize it, prices tend to rise. And the rest of the European Monetary Union has a deficit of 10%. Let's say that in average then, as a result of this, prices rise 8%. Even though Germany has a deficit of 3%, it might be that real German government spending might actually fall. So you can only profit if you have a higher deficit than the others. And the winners are the people, are the governments with the highest deficits, and the losers are people in countries with lower deficits. This is what I have called the tragedy of the commons, therefore the title of the book, Tragedy of the Euro. Like, tragedy of the commons is, for example, fishes in the oceans when property rights are not defended. Anyone can fish them, so the incentive is to fish them before the other fishers fish them. And this to an overexploitation of the resource, which in this case is the purchasing power of the euro. Well, to make this more visible, it's almost like a printing press owned by several people. Several people imagine that several people can print euros. It's a tragedy of the commons. Those that profit most, that use the printing press most, they are the first users. They print the new money. And then the costs are externalized on all users of the euro in the form of a loss in purchasing power. So governments with higher deficits gain on cost of governments with lower deficits. And there's incentive, of course, to use the printing press before the others do, because if the others are faster, then prices rise already. Yes. So there are deficits and there's a monetary redistribution. Of course, it's not as simple as this, because the Greek government, the German government, the Portuguese government, they cannot print euros directly. The only thing that they can do is print paper, write on it government bond, and then they need the banks to buy it, the ECB to accept it as collateral. So in this game, two things might fail. One is that banks don't buy your government bonds. The second is that the ECB does not accept them as collateral. But if the two things work, then it's like printing. These two problems, that the banks might not buy, the ECB could not accept as collateral the bonds, these problems are reduced because the euro from the beginning was a political project. This is why the history of the euro is so important, and why we did it. Markets knew this. There was an implicit bailout guarantee, which now has become more and more explicit. Politicians still keep saying we will never do anything to save the euro. Okay, if they will do anything to save the euro, then the system will work. And also the ECB has demonstrated its support. It has started to buy government bonds directly to support the system. And, well, there are some rules. For example, the rule was that you need a minimum rating for your government bonds for bonds to be accepted as collateral, like that it was BBB minus before, it was AA minus before the financial crisis. But when the Greek the rating of Greek government bonds fell, the ECB said, normally they would have to say, okay, now we don't accept your Greek government bonds anymore as collateral. But no, they said, first they said, no, we don't make special rules, and then they said, okay, we will accept Greek government bonds no matter what, even if they are rated as junk. The same is then was then true for Irish and Portuguese government bonds. So the ECB has also supported this. So there's practically no limit, no? Well, there was a limit, because people knew this incentive for the run for deficits, which was the Stability and Growth Pact, which put a limit on the deficit of 3% of GDP. It's like in the ocean, if you want, governments say, oh, we don't want these fishes to be overexploited, so we regulate it. We put quotas on it. You fisher A, you can fish 10,000 tons, and the other 5,000 tons. They did, and they did it the same here with the euro. You can exploit the purchasing power of the euro, you can have a deficit up to 3%. This was the limit, but it totally failed, because there were no automatic penalties never. Until today, more than 80 times, governments had deficits higher than 3%, also Germany and France. In 2010, all countries but two had higher deficits than 3%. It does not basically work because governments are judging themselves if they want to pay penalties or not, and they say, of course, no, we don't. So that's the reason why the euro is self-destructive, and why it has provoked this ever higher deficit in the sovereign debt crisis. How much time do I have? How much I want? 5-10 minutes. Okay, listen. So, the euro is not only unstable, it does not only provoke high deficits and high debts, it also finally generates conflicts, and this may be the most saddest aspect of it. Frederick Bastiat said, if goods do not cross borders, armies will. It's one of the pillars of classical liberalism. Government barriers for trade, for exchange, generate conflicts. They lead to autarky, and the desire to get rid of these barriers. And one measure to get rid of it is war. On the contrary, free exchange leads to pacific, harmonic cooperation. You get to know each other, you get to know that you depend on them, you are in contact. So there's, for example, exchange of German cars for Greek feta cheese. Where this voluntary flow of goods is disturbed in the European Union, sadly, in several ways. One is the redistribution through cohesion and regional funds. So you tax some people in some countries and give to others, the roads, etc. But also there's a redistribution through the euro. This monetary redistribution, that if I have higher deficits, I can externalize the costs in the form of higher prices on other countries. Take the example of Greece, but you may put Portugal also. Greece paid very high subsidies to keep rolling an economy that is not competitive. An economy with too high wages, with strong labor unions that kept pushing higher wages, with inflexible labor markets. So normally you would have huge high unemployment. But what did the government do? Well, it spent to alleviate the problem. It basically reduced the results of the unemployment by paying unemployment benefits, by sending them into early pension schemes, or by just hiring them for the public sector. But this costs very much money. So you have deficits, high deficits. They live beyond their means. And to cover the deficits, you issue the bonds that the banks buy, that the ECB accepts as collateral. So the money supply increases and prices rise, not only in Greece, but all over Europe. So there's a redistribution. So let's imagine the Greek government prints their bonds, they get the new money, they give it to a Greek minister who buys a German car. So then the new money flows to Germany, because prices are very high in Greece, the money stays and is not competitive, the money stays in Germany, prices go up in Germany. Of course, there's also a trade deficit, it's an import surplus for Greece, because German goods are basically exchanged for new euros or debts that maybe never And this redistribution finally leads to conflicts, because you cannot maintain an economy forever that is not competitive. It led to the bailouts of 2010 and 2011 of Greece, and a large extent of these loans are guaranteed by Germany. So these bailouts made the redistribution that existed before more apparent, more transparent. And then Germans finally got aware of this redistribution, and some Germans got very angry. And they think that Greeks are lazy. They don't want to subsidize the Greek welfare state and pay for higher and earlier pensions in Greece. So they got angry. And the Greek media responded by saying we need still reparations for the protectorate of World War II. So obviously there's a conflict between Germans and Greeks coming through this, because free trade has been disturbed by this monetary redistribution. The harmonic operation of the free market is substituted by conflicts generated by the incentives of the euro system. So the conclusion: the euro is a political project. It's naive to think whether the euro has been introduced because we want to lower transaction costs or end monetary nationalism. No, it has been introduced to lead for pressure towards more centralization, to get to a European super state that deals with the problems and the excessive debt. Well, what are the possibilities for the future? Well, there are basically three. The first is that there's a reform of the Stability and Growth Pact, so that the 3% limit, for example, will be enforced with harsh penalties, automatic penalties, or make it 2% or 1% of the euro, or put it even as debt breaks in the constitution of these countries. What does this imply? Well, this does imply very harsh reforms in the peripheral countries, privatizations of government property, public property, flexibilization of labor markets, reduction of government spending, and also reduction of living standards that has been pushed artificially high by these high deficits. And of course this will lead to resistance on the streets. There has been a strike yesterday in Portugal, so I'm not sure if this is possible, the first solution, but it could. Second possibility is that the Eurozone breaks up. In Germany, there's high inflation, and new parties are elected that say, oh, okay, enough is enough, we leave the Eurozone. Or also in a kind of suicide, Greece, for example, because their rights leaves the Eurozone. This could be possible. And the last option is centralization. Forward to a transfer union. There's a central European government. The rich and responsible governments pay for the poor and less responsible governments. Or there are Eurobonds that are guaranteed collectively, and the ECB continues to buy government bonds. Then, of course, incentives for deficits continue. The power of the central state increases. There will probably be a harmonization of tax rates. We saw it already in the case of Ireland. That this was a demand. You get the bailout and you raise your taxes, corporate taxes. So the tax competition, that is a wall against the increase of state power, would be eliminated. Then taxes will keep rising, and debts will be monetized, and inflation will rise. Okay. Here I will leave it to your own judgment what will happen. I hope for the best, and I thank you very much for your attention.